I don't want to talk about this issue because it hurts.
Over and over and over again, attacks on women's health are being written by men in state legislative chambers all over the country who don't know anything about women's bodies and how they work.
So often we see legislation that dictates what happens to women's bodies in a way that's not reflective of the emotional and physical needs of women.
This was a bill written by a man that would force a woman, anytime she has a miscarriage or an abortion, to have a burial for the fetal remains.
If there is any fetal tissue that comes out of a woman in a medical facility, that the medical facility or the family, if they've got different decisions, has to do some sort of ritual burial or cremation of the tissue. So that's if you have a miscarriage, if you if you're trying to do IVF and you have fertilized eggs that come out, any of that sort of stuff from the moment of conception, and that's sort of a broad brush stroke. It violates Roe v. Wade. It's sort of this going back to conception and calling things a baby from pre-viability.
I have made the decision that every time they run this bill, I will fight back. And telling my own story, I think, helps other women who've experienced something similar, one, know that they have someone fighting for them in the Capitol, and now I've got a bunch of folks who are fighting alongside me.
So often, stories about miscarriage, which is a really, really common occurrence, aren't told in our society because it's so early in a pregnancy often, and it's a private matter. Women don't want to talk about this issue because it hurts very often, or they're making decisions that affect their whole lives and people make judgments about them. I had what's called a missed miscarriage. So that meant that when I went to a test, a normal routine scan at about 12 weeks when I was pregnant, and they found no heartbeat. It was a non-viable pregnancy, and they knew that my body would expel the tissue and I would have a miscarriage. I ended up deciding to go home rather than taking a medicine that would start this process, or getting a surgery, and having to go back to the hospital because I was experiencing some hemorrhaging. If I had been in the situation that women will be if this bill is signed into law, I might not have gone to the hospital, and that puts women's lives at risk.
I had a miscarriage at 8.5 weeks. I went into my doctor's office and she was doing a routine ultrasound, and she said, "I'm sorry, but there's no heartbeat." And she said, "You can go home and you can either take medication to speed the process along, or you can wait." Now, I was a legislator at the time, and I was terrified of being on the House floor in voting session and starting to pass the miscarriage. And so I opted to take the medication. And in my case, my miscarriage took days. And I never knew when I was passing fetal tissue or when I was just seeing blood clots. If this bill were to become law here in Pennsylvania, I would have been mandated to collect that fetal tissue and to have a burial, whether I wanted it or not. So many women don't talk about miscarriages. I felt shame when it happened to me, even though it wasn't my fault. And there's so much shame already around miscarriage and fertility challenges. I've experienced both. And again, when we are passing these laws in Harrisburg, people are horrified.
A lot of these conversations are sort of the slippery slope towards banning abortion.
But we've got a governor's race next year. And with a different governor, this bill would become law in Pennsylvania, along with every other abortion restriction that the Republicans pass. And so we need to fight back every single time.
And if you want your reproductive rights to be protected, it is very, very important that you take that into account when you go to the ballot box.
Every single year, I've had to fight back on what I believe are unconstitutional attacks on women's reproductive justice and women's health.
I shared my story because I really wanted to personalize what this means for women. How will this affect a real woman that my colleagues know and respect, and that they can sort of see the whole person?
Women deserve the right to decide what happens with their own bodies. And whether it's a woman who's decided to have an abortion procedure or a woman who's experiencing a miscarriage, she gets to decide what happens next. Stop legislating our bodies. Stop making these decisions for us.